Hello! Today, what I'd like to talk about is solar power generation. In Japan, solar power has been getting a rather negative reputation lately. People say things like mega solar projects are no good, and there are some who think that solar power generation is already a thing of the past. However, the truth is that solar power will continue to grow more and more from here on out. In fact, I believe we are entering an era where solar power might be the only viable option. That's what I'd like to share with you today. First of all, regarding mega solar projects and such, it's true that in Japan, they tend to be viewed rather negatively. However, what's expected to increase in Japan are solar panels installed on buildings, or power generation using perovskite solar cells, which can even be attached to walls and similar surfaces. I believe these types of solar power generation will continue to grow. Of course, there are other options like wind power and hydropower, among others, but there's actually a major reason why solar power will continue to be the mainstream option going forward, and that is space development in outer space is going to become an increasingly significant factor from now on. There are already some really big ventures, including startups. Of course, that includes companies like Tesla. Just like SpaceX is sending things into space, space development will become a major keyword going forward. Now, with current technology, the only way to generate electricity in space is actually solar power. Hydroelectric power isn't possible, of course, nor is wind power, and thermal power is also out of the question. There's no oxygen after all. And as for nuclear power, well, that's just not feasible. So in reality, when you look at the options, only solar power remains, and solar power isn't mechanical in nature. Well, basically, there's no risk of breakdown. As long as there isn't a disconnection or something similar, it will continue to generate electricity, which makes it very easy to handle. So when it comes to generating electricity in space, solar panels are the main method. And when you think about that, the technology behind solar panels keeps evolving, and going forward, they will continue to be an essential means of power generation. Right now, for example, Iraq and the United States are really clashing with each other. Yes, right now it really feels like things are on the verge of turning into a full-blown war. Well, at times like this, the type of energy that draws renewed attention is energy that can be produced domestically. And this isn't just the case for Japan. There are actually many countries that aren't oil producers. So for countries that rely on imports, when they start thinking about generating their own electricity, hydropower, wind power, and solar power come into focus again, and their share increases. And now, solar power is getting even more attention. Most likely it will continue to attract more attention from here on out. I think that's the direction things are heading. And right now, the country that's actually leading the way is China. China's solar power generation, in fact, exceeds the combined output of Europe and the United States. In other words, China is actually relying on solar power for its electricity generation more than anyone else. In a sense, since China is not an oil-producing country, and given the situation where it has to depend on other countries for energy, it has chosen solar power as a way to generate energy domestically and is installing solar panels on a massive scale. I'm not saying whether this is good or bad, but if we look at the direction things are heading, it's clear that China is trying to produce its own energy. That's the situation. As for Japan, I believe it is particularly vulnerable in times of war. Because it is an island nation, it relies heavily on imports, and since those imports come by ship, if the safety of the surrounding seas is compromised, Japan would be greatly affected. Japan has enjoyed peace for many years, but well, if, for example, China and the United States were to go to war, then naturally Japan would side with the United States. Even in situations where we would have no choice but to fight. Now, that possibility might arise. So as long as peace continues in Asia, I basically think Japan will be okay. However, even so, when conflicts occur in the Middle East or other countries, Japan as a nation is affected. In particular, we are especially impacted when it comes to energy and food issues. That's why we need to make sure that we can provide for ourselves with our own capabilities. Yes, you could say it's a bit early. Japan obviously faces significant disaster risks, and it's also a country that carries considerable conflict risks. When it comes to disasters, we really might not be able to prevent them from happening. Yes, the same goes for conflicts. I don't think Japan has the power to stop conflicts happening around the world, but being able to take measures when they do occur is one of Japan's strengths. In that sense, I believe it's truly essential for us to see how much energy we can produce domestically, including food. And I believe that solar power is the only solution to this issue, which is why I am also involved in solar energy. Right now, the solar power market is being reevaluated, and it's not a market that's going to disappear in the future. Even if the FIT, feed-in tariff system, ends, I believe that solar power is still a field that will continue to grow. To be honest, I feel a strong sense of discomfort with the recent trend of treating solar power as if it's already over or as something not very good. People say, isn't solar power the only option? Or what exactly is bad for the environment about solar power? That's what I think. Of course, I believe there are plenty of reasons people say it's bad for the environment. For example, what happens if you clear forests to install solar panels? But if you start talking like that, then what about clearing forests to build houses? It just goes on and on. It's inevitable that there will be negative aspects. As long as humans continue to live, we have to interact with the environment in some way. But I believe that fundamentally solar panels are something that protect the environment. However, I also think that it's not something we should do to the extent of destroying nature. So my answer is that installing them on buildings and similar structures should be enough to meet our needs. If we keep installing them in such places, I believe that's the way to go. The conversion efficiency is also improving, so we can replace old solar panels as well. With new panels, we'll be able to generate even more electricity. So in that sense, I hope everyone recognizes that solar power still has a lot of potential for growth in the future. Yes, and in this way, yes, if there's anything else, I'd like to share it with you. Thank you very much.